Hey there guys, welcome to the video. My name is Pushpinder Gill, and in this video we're going to be talking about the profit theory, right? So suppose you've already watched the videos on the previous topics that involve the cost theory and the revenue theory. In this video we're going to be focusing on the cost theory. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Okay, so what exactly is profit? Now profit is actually equal to your revenue that you earn minus the cost that you incur. So this is how you define profit, right? However, this cost over here, when I talk in economics terms, this cost also includes your opportunity costs, right? So this cost also includes your opportunity cost. So let's suppose, if I take an example, let's suppose there is a firm, firm A, and the total revenue that it generates, it's actually equal to $200,000, and its fixed cost is actually equal to $40,000. Its variable cost is something which is equal to $80,000. And its opportunity cost. Now what do you mean by opportunity cost? Opportunity cost means that if, let's suppose, he is not the firm owner is not operating this firm, instead he's actually going for the next best alternative, and that next best alternative is giving him $60,000, right? So which is why the total cost is actually going to become this plus this plus this, which is actually equal to $180,000. Fine. So you have to actually involve the opportunity cost as well when it comes to this cost, right? So in economics terms, how would you define normal profit? So how do you actually define normal profit? Normal profit is something when your revenue is actually equal to cost. When this value is equal to 0, that is what we call normal profit when it comes to economics. And how do we talk about abnormal profit? Now, abnormal profit is something where your revenue is actually greater than the cost, right? So your revenue is greater than the cost, then you have abnormal profits. And how do you have loss? You have loss when your revenue is actually lesser than the cost. Fine. So I suppose you're understanding this point over here. Now let's go ahead and consider different scenarios, right? So the first scenario that I would like to cover is the shutdown price. So the first scenario that I'd like to cover is known as the shutdown price. Now what do you mean by shutdown price? Now if I were to define the shutdown price of a firm, it is actually the level of price. So I'm going to define that. It's the level of price that enables, so that is something which enables a firm to cover its variable costs. So to cover its variable costs in the short run, right? So all you have to be concerned about is the variable cost. You don't have to be concerned about the fixed cost, because fixed costs are something that you're going to cover even though you shut down or even if you don't shut down. So the shutdown price is the price that means it's actually a firm is actually able to cover its variable costs. Now if the firm is not able to cover its variable costs, that means it is beneficial for the firm to actually shut down till it starts covering the variable costs, right? So that is what the meaning of shutdown price is. Now if I were to draw the graph, let's suppose if I say this over here is the price and it's the cost, and I say let's suppose this over here is the output, and I have this as my average variable cost, and I have this as my average total cost. I suppose you watched the videos and you know that this is how everything looks like, and this is my marginal cost. Now how do I talk about the shutdown price? How do I put the shutdown price in? Now shutdown price is actually the price where I'm able to cover my variable cost. So shutdown price is the price where I'm able to cover my variable cost. So if I kind of show it here, I'm going to use a different color pen for that. right? So this is my average variable cost. This is the minimum average variable cost. So that means this price over here, is actually going to be my shutdown price. And this is the output that I'll be producing during that shutdown price. Fine. So this price P is actually the shutdown price, where I'm actually covering the minimum average variable cost. Below this price is not even necessary, it's not even beneficial to actually go ahead and produce the output, because you will not be able to cover even your variable cost, which means a firm would actually shut down for a short period of time. Now there are many examples of a firm shutting down, right? So in Austria, right? So there is an ice cream store. So there is an ice cream store in Austria which actually shuts down, right? It shuts down in the month of October, right? So it shut down in the month of October because the revenue that it generates, it's actually lesser than the variable cost it incurs, and it starts again in the month of January and in the month of February till the month of September. Right now, why does it shut down? Because fixed costs are something that it's going to incur all the time. So the variable costs, if the variable costs are lesser than the revenue generated, then only it's advisable for the firm to keep on operating. However, if the variable cost becomes more than the revenue generated, then it is beneficial for the firm to shut down for that time period. So this is what we call as the shutdown price. Now let's go ahead and define the second scenario, which is the break-even price. Now what do you mean by break-even price? Now break-even price is the price at which, so it's the price level at which a firm is able to make normal profit. So the firm is able to make normal profit in the long run, right? So this is the price in which a firm is able to make normal profit, which means the revenues are actually equal to the cost, right? So that means it's actually covering up the minimum cost, the minimum total cost. It's covering up the fixed cost as well. It's covering up the variable cost as well. So if I were to draw my graph, and this is the price and this is the cost and this is the quantity, again the same stuff, that is the average cost, the average variable cost, average total cost, and this is my marginal cost. Now this price is actually going to be my break even price, because at this price what am I doing is I'm actually covering up my average total cost. This is the minimum average total cost. So at this price actually I'm covering up my average total cost. Fine. So I suppose you're understanding this point over here. This is what we mean by the break even price. Now let's go ahead and understand another scenario, which is the last scenario here, that is actually the profit maximizing level of output. What is the profit maximizing level of output, right? So if I were to draw a graph, let's suppose if I were to draw the graph of price and cost here, the same stuff, right? And I have the output over here. Now if I were to draw the average revenue and marginal revenue, right? So if I were to draw the average revenue and marginal revenue, which is going to be this line over here, so our average revenue is actually equal to the marginal revenue. Now if I draw the marginal cost curve, this is how the marginal cost curve looks like. Now understand over here. Now till this point to this point, what is happening? Till this point to this point, the marginal cost is actually greater than the average revenue. So marginal cost is greater than the marginal revenue, which means till now I'm making losses, isn't it? Because the amount of revenue earned by adding another unit of output is actually lesser than it's lesser than the amount of cost incurred by adding extra unit of variable factor, which means my marginal cost is something which is greater than marginal revenue. That means till this point I'm making losses. But after this point, what starts to happen? After this point, so this point over here, let's suppose this is point P. So this point over here, that is point P, is actually known as the profit minimization point. So till this point, or is also known as the loss maximization. So till this point, I have actually incurred maximum possible losses that I am going to incur, right? So after this point, my profit starts to kick in, right? So from this point all the way till this point, the marginal cost is less than marginal revenue, right? So till this point, I would have made the maximum possible profit. So P1 point over here is the profit maximization point, right? So till this point, I've made the maximum possible profit, because at this point, what is true? Marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost. So when marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, which is equal to the average cost, then the profit is maximized, right? So suppose you're understanding this point over here. When marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, which is equal to the average revenue, then the profit is something which is maximized. And if I go above again, marginal cost, marginal revenue, it's over here is again lesser than the marginal cost, which means over here, again, I will be incurring losses. So from now onwards, what we're going to do is, if we show the average revenue and marginal cost in a curve, we will actually forget about this altogether, and we will always show them like this to show this point. So we will completely forget about this point, because we need to see this intersection rather than this intersection, because at this intersection the profit is going to be maximized. Fine. So suppose you're understanding this point over here. Now at this point, in this graph, the price elasticity of demand is infinite, right? It's something that we did in the previous video, because the average revenue is a straight line. But what if the average revenue is not a straight line, right? What if I were to show you like this? Now in this, what happens is the price changes with with respect to the quantity demanded. In the previous one, the price was not changing. The price is something which was actually a constant, right? So in this, price actually changes. So if I were to draw this graph, this is price and cost, and this is the output. So if I were to draw this graph over here, this is going to be the marginal revenue. If you do not understand this curve, I would recommend you to watch the previous video in which we have actually drawn these curves. And this over here is the average revenue. Fine. And this over here, it's the marginal cost. Now, what is going to be the optimum price for profit maximization? That is going to be the price where marginal revenue is equal to the marginal cost, which is going to be this point over here, which means this is going to be my optimum output for profit maximization, and this is going to be my optimum price for profit maximization. Now understand, price is given by the average revenue curve, and the cost is given by the marginal cost or the average cost curve. Fine. So I suppose you're understanding this point over here, right? Now let's go ahead and try and define. So now let's go ahead and define when the firm will actually make abnormal profits, right? So the previous case was actually the case of normal profits. This case is actually the case of normal profits. Now actually this is not the case of anything. In fact, we haven't introduced the average cost curve. Now let's go ahead and talk about the case for abnormal profits. Now before I do that, I'll actually draw a pretty standard curve. So you have the price and you have the cost, and you have the output here. Now, if I were to, draw the previous curve again, so this is my marginal revenue, this is my average revenue, and this is the marginal cost. Now, understand, this is the average cost curve is something which can be anywhere, right? So the average cost curve is something which can move along. How? Why? How it can move along? Right? So let's suppose if I were to draw the average cost curve, so the average cost curve is the average cost curve is actually going to look something like this, and this is going to be its lowest point. Now understand, at this point over here where marginal cost is actually equal to the marginal revenue, at this point the profit is maximized. So I'll be producing this much output at this much price. However, this when the output cuts the average cost curve, that will actually give me the cost. So this area over here is something that I denote as abnormal profits, right? So again, I'll explain this. At this point where marginal cost is equal to the marginal revenue, that is the output for profit maximization. So at this amount, I'll be producing at this, I'll be selling at this much price. However, the cost is something which is given by the average cost curve. So that means at this point, this is the cost that I'm going to incur. However, this is the cost that I'm going to incur. This area is actually going to be the area of abnormal profits. Now understand, the average cost curve can actually move along the marginal cost curve like up or down anywhere, right? So that will actually explain so many different scenarios. Now let's suppose another scenario would be wherein I have a really high cost. Let's suppose this is how the another average cost curve is. Now if this is the average cost curve where this is the price, then this is going to be my cost. If this is going to be my cost, then this area will actually represent a loss. Fine. So that is there, and if I want the price to be actually equal to the cost, then I will keep the average cost curve to be somewhere here, right? So if this is another average cost curve, now in this case the price is actually equal to the cost, because this line over here is meeting the price also, it's meeting the average revenue also, it's meeting the average cost also. At this price, that means I have normal profits. So suppose you're understanding this point over here, what I'm going to do is, just for doing it again, I'll actually do it again. This over here is your price or cost, and this over here is your output. Fine. And this over here is your marginal revenue, and this over here is your average revenue. So let's suppose this is the case of normal profits, right? So this is the case of normal profits. So, and this over here is my marginal cost. So when marginal cost meets the marginal revenue, this is the optimum output, and this is the price that I'll be producing at. And what if the average cost curve is something like this? So if the average cost is something like this, at this point over here is actually going to be my cost as well, which means price is equal to cost. That means this is the case for normal profits. However, if I were to draw this graph again, so I'm going to draw it with white color now. If I were to draw this graph again, let's suppose, you know, I'm going to take the liberty of not defining. Okay, fine. This is the output. This is price or cost. This is the marginal revenue. This is the average revenue, right? And this is the marginal cost. Now, when marginal cost means the marginal revenue, this is the output. This is the this is the output, and this is the price, right? So if this is the price, and let's suppose the average cost curve is something which is, let's say, right here. So let's suppose the average cost curve, it's something which is right here, right? So at this point, it's going to be my cost. So this is going to be my abnormal profit. Fine. Now if I were to show you a loss, in a loss, if this is your marginal curve, marginal revenue, average revenue, marginal cost, right? And if I say this is the price, right? And I say this is your average cost curve, and this is your cost, then this is going to be your loss. Fine. So I suppose you're understanding what I'm trying to say here. So that pretty much explains the profit theory. So I suppose you've understood what I've done over here, right? So thank you very much for watching this video, guys. And in the next videos, we're going to be talking about perfect competition, monopoly, and all, all these different kind of various scenarios. So before we go ahead, and this is going to be our our website address, that is perfect-scores.com. This is going to be our Facebook page. Don't forget to give us your valuable like, follow us on Twitter, and this is going to be our email address to give us your valuable feedback. So this would be about this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.